In this case study of Key and Ka, we will talk about a couple who arrive at a certain budget for their house, but as they were shortlisting other houses, they realized that they actually like a house which is beyond their budget. Now, although they absolutely love the house, they decide to approach an advisor to figure out a way in which they can afford to buy a house which is outside their budget, or should they stick to the house which is within their budget but which is actually their second option for the home that they want to move into. So let's start with first introducing the couple and introducing their cash flows and their investment portfolio, and we will run through the exact issues that they faced and how did they eventually arrive at a solution for the different issues at different stages of their home buying process. In our Key and Ka couple, Key is a marketing professional whereas Ka is a homemaker. Both of them have been married for over 3 years now and they've been living on rent in a 1 BHK in Pune, paying a rent of INR 25,000 per month. They now decided to start looking for a house so that they can move from a rented house to a permanent house that they can call their own home. If we start with looking at the cash flows of the couple, Key earns a in-hand salary income of 1.5 lakhs, of which she manages to save an amount of 60,000, and the balance amount of 90,000 is what is spent towards meeting their day-to-day household expenses. Ka, being a non-earning member, he also has access to the joint expense account so that they have a smooth run in managing their day-to-day household expenses. If you look at their breakup, they are spending 60% of their earnings towards their expenses and 40% is being saved, which is a pretty healthy breakup of earnings is to savings. If you look at the gross salary of Key, she actually earns an amount of 1,90,000 per month, of which 20,000 each month is deducted towards her income taxes and 20,000 each month is contributed towards the EPF investment. So after 40,000 is deducted from her gross earnings of 1,90,000, what she gets in her hand is an amount of 1,50,000 per month. Of this, 60% is spent towards the various expenses being rent, household expenses, utilities, etc. And the balance 40%, that is 60,000 per month, is being saved and invested into the various options including deposits, stocks, mutual funds and other investment options. To give you a detailed rundown of their cash flows, from the gross salary of 1,90,000, after the deduction for EPF and taxes, what she receives in an amount of 1,50,000. Their total expenses of 90,000 are broken up into rent 25, groceries, utilities and bills, household help, commute travel, and finally personal spends of 25,000 each month, resulting in a total expense of 90,000 and a monthly saving of 60,000 each month. Now this is what their cash flows look like before they decide on buying their new home. From cash flows, let's have a look at the portfolio of Key and Ka. If you look at their portfolio, they have certain investments in fixed deposits, they have investments in debt mutual funds, they have some investments in equity mutual funds, and finally some investments in their EPF and PPF accounts. Obviously, since Key is working, her investments are in the EPF account, whereas Ka's investments are in the PPF account. So that gives them a total portfolio of 30,80,000. So when they decide to set up a budget for buying their home, out of the total portfolio, they must exclude their EPF and PPF balances because these are technically investments that are being done for their long term, that is for their retirement. And to the extent possible, you do not want to touch these balances when you're making your home buying decision. So when we actually consider the portfolio available for the down payment, we are going to exclude EPF and PPF and consider only the balance investments. Now that you've seen their cash flows, you've seen their portfolio holdings, let's do a computation of what is the value of the house that they can afford. Obviously, given their cash flows and given the fact that they are going to buy a house in a place like Pune, they are definitely going to take assistance of a home loan and look to buy a house wherein they fund up to 20% of the down payment of the house and take the help of a bank to fund the balance 80% of the house that they finalize. So going by our benchmark of our EMIs being equal to 40% of your take home, in this case the take home salary of Key is 1.5 lakhs. So the EMI that they can comfortably afford is an amount of 60,000 rupees per month. At an interest rate of 7.5% and assuming a tenure of 20 years, they will be able to get a loan for 74.5 lakhs, which is equal to the 80% of the value of the home. And doing a reverse working, you will be able to arrive at a number of 93 lakhs, which is the value of the home that Key and Kaa can afford. With the budget of 93 lakhs in mind, they go to the market and start looking for various properties, and eventually they shortlist about 6-7 properties out of the 40 properties that they actually visit, and they realize that they like a particular house which is beyond their budget and is actually costing them 1.16 crores versus their budget of 93 lakhs. And this properties which is under construction, they expect to receive only after 3 years, because it is still being constructed. It's not a ready to move in property, but they absolutely love the house and they are wondering if they can afford to put money on a house which is way beyond their budget at 1.16 crores versus 93 lakhs. Since Key and Kaa absolutely love the house which is costing them 1.16 crores, one alternative they can consider is actually take an EMI which is not 40% of their take home but equal to 50% of their take home, which will increase their capability to service the EMI and increase the amount of loan they will be eligible for. So if we look at their numbers with an EMI of 50% of their take home, that means with an income of 1,50,000 each month, they are going to take on an EMI which will be equal to half of their income, which is an EMI of 75,000 per month at an interest rate of 7.5% and a loan tenure of 20 years. They will get a loan equal to 93 lakh of rupees. And if that is equal to 80% of the value of the house, the value of the home which they can target to buy actually goes up and is pretty close to the value of the house that they absolutely loved at 1.16 crores. Now, when they increased the EMI from 60 to 75,000, obviously they are able to afford the house that they absolutely love, that is the house worth 1.16 crores. But we need to go and do a rundown on what their cash flows will look like. So if you look at their cash flows, today they are saving an amount of 60,000 per month. But if they were to take a house with an EMI of 75,000 each month, how will they be able to fund? Because they already have a shortfall. Since the house is under construction, the rent expense is going to continue for the next 3 years. If they have to afford an EMI of 75,000, they just have a saving of 60,000. They'll have to look at ways to cut down their expenses, and the only option is to cut down their personal spends from 25,000 to 10,000 per month. With that 15,000 of saving, their total saving goes up from 60 to 75,000, and that is the only way they will be able to fund their EMI of 75,000 rupees each month. And obviously with that EMI in place, their savings will go down to an absolute zero. Looking at these numbers, they are concerned as to whether they will be able to afford their dream home and actually think of dropping the plan because the cash flows are just getting unmanageable. Just when they thought they could afford the house that they really loved, they realized that they've hit a block hole and their cash flows would just not be manageable. They would be way too stretched, and they wonder, is there a way out from this? When talking to the advisor tells them that the EMI of 75,000 per month will start only after they get possession of the house. So for 3 years, they will not have to pay a EMI. They will have to pay what is known as the pre-EMI, which is directly linked with the amount of loan that is disbursed, and you will be servicing only the interest portion of the loan that has been disbursed. The EMI of 75,000, although being computed today, will technically start only after 3 years after you get possession of the house. Given that is the situation, because they are buying a property under construction, how will their cash flows look like? If you look at the loan disbursement schedule, only 10% of the loan gets disbursed in year 1, 30% in year 2, 40% in year 4, and the balance 20% gets disbursed at the beginning of year 4. So the amount of EMI that they will have to pay in the first 3 years is actually only a pre-EMI, which is only the interest component on the amount of loan that is disbursed. So on the loan of 9.3 lakhs, they will have to pay a pre-EMI interest of 5,800 per month. In the second year, the disbursement increases, the pre-EMI goes up to 23,250, and in the third year, it goes up to 46,500. It is only at the beginning of year 4 when the total amount is disbursed and they get occupancy certificate of the property at the beginning of year 4. That is when the total EMI of 75,000 kicks in, and that is when they will have to start paying an amount of 75,000 each month. While Ki and Ka are convinced that they will be able to manage through the first 3 years because the pre-EMI is much lower than the EMI of 75,000, they have a valid question of what happens in year 4 when they have to pay the EMI of 75,000. Now, what they have not considered is over the next 3 years, he expects a certain increase in her salary, and if that is taken into account, then their cash flows will look much more manageable because within the next 3 years, her income would go up, and eventually after 3 years in year 4, we need to do a check of if her income will be able to afford that particular EMI or not. So let's do a rundown of their cash flows to understand how much do they save each year during the pre-EMI phase, and will they be able to afford the EMI of 75,000, assuming that Ki's income grows by 10% every year, which is a very nominal increase you can expect living in any of the metros and working for a reputed company in a marketing job. And at the same time, we also assume that their expenses would also increase at a rate of 5% every year. So if you look at their cash flows, in the year 1, she earns an income of 1,50,000. Her total expenses are 90,000 per month, and she saves an amount of 60,000. Out of the 60,000, a pre-EMI amount of 5,800 is paid each month, resulting in a total saving of INR 54,200 during year 1 of their cash flows versus their pre-home purchase savings of 60,000 per month. Now what happens in year 2? In year 2, you would expect her income in hand to go up by 10% from 1.5 lakhs to 1.65 lakhs. The expenses remain the same except with the change that all the expenses have gone up by 5%. So her total expenses increase to 94,500, and her EMI is the one which increases drastically from 5,800 a month to 23,250 a month, resulting in her savings falling to an amount of 47,250. So you can see that her savings have reduced, but they have not reduced as much as by the increase in the pre-EMI because her income also has gone up by 10% in year 2. When we come to year 3, you would expect her income to go up to 1.81 lakhs, which is an increase of 10% compared to the previous year. Her expenses also go up by 5% and are now at 1 lakh rupees per month. And her pre-EMI interest has also gone up now to 46,500 rupees. Now, because of the increase in the pre-EMI, her savings have reduced further. The couple now save 35,000 per month for the year 3 of their cash flows since making the decision to buy the house. To summarize the cash flows of the 3 years, we see that every year the income is increasing by 10%, their expenses are increasing by 5%. Please note here that rent is still a part of their expense because they've still not got possession of the house. They will get the possession only in year 4, so they will have to continue to incur the cost for rent. Their pre-EMI interest is the new expense they have to incur as and when the loan is disbursed towards the construction of the house, and their savings each month reduce from 54,200 in year 1 to 47,250 in year 2 and 35,000 in year 3. For the purpose of the calculation and to be on the prudent side, we've not taken into account any bonus that she would earn during the year, which will again help to cushion their cash flows. Now, while these 3 years of pre-EMI look comfortable and look achievable, the obvious question is what happens when they reach year 4 or the year when the actual EMI start. So here again, we look at their income and see whether they'll be able to meet the year 4 cash flows or not. her income again goes up by 10%. So she has an income of 2 lakhs in her hand, and the expenses now would also go up by 5%. But what would change here is that they would no more have to pay the rent expense as they've moved into a new house. While they save on rent, they will have an additional maintenance cost payable of 5,000 rupees per month for the new home that they've moved in. That is the maintenance and property tax which is paid to the society, and they eventually take care of the maintenance of the society, and the property tax is paid to the local authorities. In addition to the maintenance cost, Ki and Ka actually experience a situation where they are paying a tax of 3,400, which is more than what they would pay when they were claiming an HRA. So since here it's not a couple, it is just Ki who is earning, and she's the only one who was claiming the HRA for the rent being paid. When they stop paying the rent and start claiming a deduction for the home loan, they actually land up paying a higher amount of tax compared to what they were paying earlier, resulting in a total expense of 83,400 per month. Now with a total income of 2 lakhs, a total expense of 83,400, a EMI of 75,000, they still land up with a saving of 41,600 per month. So you can see here that when they started off at the beginning, obviously they did not have enough savings. They had a saving of 60,000, and the EMI which they expected to pay out was 75,000 per month. There was no way they could meet these cash flows unless they cut down on their personal spends. But since this is a property under construction and they're going to start their EMIs only after 3 years, assuming a 10% increase in her income year on year, they're actually able to arrive at year 4 where they're able to meet the EMI of 75,000, and because of the rent saving, they are also able to save an amount every month of 41,000, which will go towards building up their corpus for their future goals. A question that you may have is, how is it that they're having a higher tax payout compared to staying on rent? Let's look at the numbers in detail. When Ki and Ka was staying on rent, they were paying a rent of 28,000 per month, which results in a rent of 3.36 lakhs for the year. Assuming that she falls in the 30% tax bracket, which she does, the total taxes she saved by claiming the HRA was an amount of 1,800,000. Now these tax savings will be no longer available. Instead, the tax saving which she can get is a deduction for the principal of the loan that she pays, which is 1.5 lakhs per year, a deduction for the interest on the home loan, which is 2 lakh per year. Since she is already having her contribution towards EPF and she is also paying for the PPF account of Ka, they are already taking the deductions under 80C. So the only additional benefit they get is the deduction of interest of home loan. And again, since she is the only earning member, only she can claim a deduction. Ka cannot claim any deduction for the home loan interest and principal. So the total savings she will have is an amount of 30% of 2 lakhs, which is 60,000. Compared to the taxes she saved when they were on rent of 1,800,000, the total saving under the home loan scenario is only 60,000, resulting in an additional cash flow of taxes to the tune of 3,400 per month. So while it is a very popular belief that you should buy a house for the tax saving that you get from it, that is not the case today with the various changes in government laws with respect to income taxes and the various cappings that they've introduced. And you need to look at the numbers for yourself, apply to your finances and see whether you actually save on taxes or there is no impact or you are actually adversely impacted, like the case of Ki and Ka. If you look at their cash flows after they moved into the house in year 4, this is what it will look like. They expect to spend 75,000 of their income towards EMI, which is 38% of her total income of 2 lakhs. 42% of her income goes towards living expenses, which is 83,400, and the balance 41,600, which is almost 20% of the income, is what they are able to save on a monthly basis. So we see here that they are still able to have a savings in year 4 when they actually start incurring the EMI expense, and their cash flows actually look comfortable compared to what they thought that they will not be able to meet their cash flows when they look at an EMI of 75,000 per month. While they are convinced now that they will be able to meet the EMI expenses and they meet it comfortably only because they have a saving still of 41,000 each month in year 4 when the EMI start. While we've accounted for a 10% increase year on year, what we've not accounted for in their cash flows is the expected bonus which she will earn every year. If you were to add that bonus amount, their cash flows will look a little more comfortable than what they look now. But prudence always helps, and we continue to stay prudent while looking at their numbers so that they are prepared for any downside event if it were to happen for them. While they have been able to take care of their cash flows, the next question that needs to be asked is, will they be able to meet the down payment and the overhead requirements for the larger home? When it was a home worth 93 lakhs, the down payment requirements were smaller and the overhead expenses also were smaller. And given that this is a property under construction, they have to take into account the GST also that has to be paid. So when they increase the value to 1.16 crores, while we've seen till now that they are able to afford the EMI of 75 lakhs, the next question to be asked is, can they afford the down payment and the overheads that they have to pay when they decide to buy the larger house? Before we decide the amount of money that is available for them to utilize from their portfolio for making a down payment for the house and to pay for the overhead charges, let's first look at the amount they need to put aside as their safety net. Now, they should keep aside an emergency fund which is equal to 6 times their expenses. At 80,000 per month, they have to keep aside 4.8 lakhs as an emergency fund so that they are not left with zero cash after they've finished making the down payment of their house. While Key has an appropriate term insurance, a term plan of 1.5 crores, they are both adequately covered in terms of their health insurance so that in case of emergency, they can fall back on their health plan. And finally, if you look at their near-term goals, since they've been married for 3 years, they do not have any urgent goals. They do not have any amount they want to keep aside for the next couple of years, and whatever money they're able to save each month, they would like to save for their long-term requirements. So if you look at the breakup of the house, when the EMI of the house was equal to 40% of their income, they could afford to take a loan for 74.5 lakhs. They had to make a down payment of 18.6 lakhs, and their overhead charges at 18% would be about 21 lakhs, resulting in the total value of the house at 1.14 crores. But when they decide to increase the budget of the house and take a loan of 93 lakhs, which is possible if they spend 50% of their take-home income towards the EMI, they will have to fund a down payment of 23.26 lakhs and also overhead charges of 26.3 lakhs, resulting in the total cost of the house at 1.42 crores. When they look at these numbers, obviously Key and Car worried that while the cash flow problem was solved, what about the down payment and overhead charges? It doesn't look like that they would have enough amount to be able to pay for the down payment as well as the overhead charges of the larger house that they liked. Now, when they asked the advisor as to what is the probable solution to this problem, the only probable solution is to take more loans to be able to fund the down payment and to be able to fund the overhead charges. Unlike the two states couple, they were not lucky enough to receive an inheritance from their parents, and here they'll have to fund the shortfall from further loans that they need to take. Now that raises further questions. Can they afford an additional loan? They have just managed to figure out a way to be able to service the EMI of 75,000 per month. If they were to take additional loans to fund the down payment and the overhead charges, what will their finances look like? Can they afford it? To understand this better, we do a further breakdown of what are the cash flows expected towards buying the larger house that they really like. Now, when you look at the value of the house, it costs 1.16 crores. They will have to budget an amount of 1.16 lakhs towards registration charges, which is 1%. An amount of 6.5 lakhs towards stamp duty, which is 6% of the value of the house. They'll have to budget 1.16 lakhs towards the brokerage that they have to pay to the broker, and they have to budget a GST tax of 5.83 lakhs. The good thing here is that since this is a house which is fully furnished, they don't have to budget for any amount to be spent towards the furnishing of the house. Obviously, they would want to keep some amount towards certain appliances that they may want to buy after they move in, but as such they don't need to put aside any money towards the furnishing of the house. What is important to understand now is that Key and Ka will have to immediately incur an expense towards the brokerage commission of 1.16 lakhs and the GST of 5.83 lakhs. But with respect to the registration charges and stamp duty, although they form a part of the overhead charges, they don't have to be paid today. They have to be paid 3 years later when they move into the new house and they get possession of the house. That is when they need to pay the registration and stamp duty charges. So what they have to pay today is only an amount of 1.16 lakhs towards the brokerage and 5.8 lakhs towards the GST amount. So the total overheads that they need to budget for today is an amount of 7 lakhs. So to give you a bird's eye view of what their home cost looks like, 93 lakhs of the home will be funded from the home value that they expect from the bank. 20% of the home loan, that is 23.26 lakhs, they will have to fund from their pocket as a part of the down payment. Out of the overhead cost that they need to incur, they have to pay only an amount of 7 lakhs today, while the balance overheads of 7.67 lakhs, which consists of the stamp duty and registration, will have to be paid only after 3 years. So the total amount that they need to fund today from their pocket is an amount of 23.26 lakhs plus 7 lakhs, totaling to an amount of 30.26 lakhs. Now that they know that they have to fund an amount of 30.26 lakhs, let's have a look at their portfolio to see if they have enough money and what is the shortfall that they are staring at. If you look at the total portfolio value, it has an amount of 30.8 lakhs, of which you want to exclude the amount lying in their EPF and PPF accounts, which is an amount of 2 lakhs because that is money set aside for their retirement. Then you want to set aside a certain amount for the emergency fund, which we just saw equal to 6 times their monthly expenses, which is an amount of 4.8 lakhs. So with 9.5 lakhs set aside for emergency fund and 2.3 lakhs towards the EPF PPF account, which they don't want to touch, they are left with a total fund available of 24 lakhs. So while their requirements for the down payment plus overheads today is 30.26 lakhs and the funds available are 24 lakhs, they are left with a shortfall of 6.26 lakhs. Now the question is, how do they go about meeting the shortfall? Given that they've already taken a certain amount of loan from the bank, the easiest option available for them to take a loan of 6.26 lakhs from their friends or to seek a personal loan from either a bank or a financial institution like a NBFC. So while they have identified the shortfall, the next question is, how do they get the loan to meet the shortfall and can they afford the loan? If you go back to their cash flows, they are actually saving a certain amount each month for the first 3 years and their actual full EMI will start only in year 4 after they get the occupancy certificate for the property. Till then, they will be saving a certain amount each month, and that saving of these 3 years is what is going to be used to be able to repay this loan which they need today. So they're sitting with a shortfall of 6.26 lakhs which they need to fund. While they look around for options, they see that they'll be able to borrow this money from their friends and they need not approach a bank for their loan. Now if you go back to their savings each year, because they will be paying a pre-EMI and not a full EMI, their yearly savings for the first 3 years total to an amount of 16.37 lakhs. That is 6.5 lakhs in year 1, 5.67 lakhs in year 2 and 4.2 lakhs in year 3. By the end of year 2, they will be able to pay back the loan of 6.26 lakhs which they took from their friends along with an interest of 9%. So that is a total payout of 7.4 lakhs. Whereas when they come to end of year 3 or the beginning of year 4, that is when they register the property, they will have to incur the stamp duty and registration charges of 7.67 lakhs, which again will be funded from the savings of these 3 years. And after they've paid out both of this, they are actually left with a surplus of 1.2 lakhs, which is available for them to either go towards their investments or to be spent towards some of the other appliances they want to add to the new home that they will be moving in. So what you've seen here is what seemed like an improbable cash flow and an improbable target to achieve. By being extremely prudent with their cash flows, by being extremely disciplined in how they manage their money, they have been able to save a certain amount of money during the 3 years when the property is under construction and use that saving to be able to fund the down payment of a larger than budgeted house, to be able to pay for the other overhead expenses, which is in addition to the 20% down payment you have to make, and actually land up with a small saving at the end of year 3. So while all the down payment and overheads are taken care of, we've already seen that from year 4, their cash flows are actually pretty comfortable. They can meet the EMI of 75,000 each month and also have a saving of 20% of their total income. Obviously, if you were to change the scenario and assume that they're going to buy a property which is not under construction but ready to move in, there is no way that they could afford the house of a larger amount if it was a ready to move in house, because they didn't have the finances to be able to fund the down payment, the overheads, the stamp duty, GST of a house which is ready to move in, because all of those cash flows will have to be paid today, and your EMI also starts immediately after you move into the house, right? Their EMIs became affordable because within 3 years we assumed a certain increase in income, and that was a very prudent assumption and a very practical assumption which let them result in a cash flow which is a very comfortable cash flow in year 4 when they actually get the possession of the house. One thing you should keep in mind is when you're looking for properties which are under construction, you buy it from builders whom you expect to deliver on time and not delay. With the RERA Act coming into force, it has made the life easier for consumers because you have rights under this act which protect the delays from builders. But that said and done, during a pre-EMI phase when the property is under construction, you should understand that you're incurring 2 costs, one for the rent and second towards the pre-EMI interest to service the loan. So these 3 years when the property is being constructed, you are incurring double costs and you start saving the rent only when you move into the property. So you would want to choose a builder who has a history of delivering the projects on time so that your cash flows do not get restrained or do not get stretched further. If we have a look at their home buying journey in the form of the roadmap, you will see that obviously they set the budget for their house at 93 lakhs. They started scouting for houses and realized that they actually liked a house which is worth 1.16 crores but which was beyond their budget, but it ticked all the boxes with respect to the features that they wanted in their new home. That's when they consulted a financial advisor to help them through this particular purchase. While the financial advisor was able to work around their finances and arrive at the numbers which not only help them meet their cash flows of paying an EMI each month, but also help them arrange for the down payment and other overhead costs that they had to incur for a house which was larger than their original budget. Once they were comfortable with the cash flows, that is when they decided to sign the agreement to sell. Because it was an under construction property, the agreement to sell was signed and the home loan was approved by the banks based on the income profile of Key. And for the next 3 years, what Key & Ka had to do was they were to service the loan in terms of the pre-EMI interest, and the loan kept on increasing every year based on the construction of the property. As and when a higher amount was disbursed, the pre-EMI interest also went up, and eventually by the end of the 3 years of pre-EMI when the property is under construction, Key & Ka were able to save enough amount to repay the loan of 6.2 lakhs which they borrowed from their friends and family, and also accumulate an amount to pay for the stamp duty and registration of the property. At the end of 3 years, they paid for the stamp duty and registration. They were able to sign off the sale agreement at the end of 3 years, get the possession of the property and move into their new home. In this case study, we've tried to show you that reality may not be as rosy as theory is. In reality, there would be a lot of constraints, there would be a lot of juggling that you have to do, there would be a lot of ifs and buts. But if you are a financially disciplined person, if you are having the right advice with you, you can definitely achieve certain move arounds, certain workarounds without constraining your finances too much. While this case study talked about a couple who wanted to move into a new house, in the next case study we will talk about a single individual who is looking to buy a new house and how he will deal with the various challenges and constraints of buying the house for himself.